So this is a video I'm incredibly excited about finally getting out, covering the really cool and versatile concept of exponential rhythms, specifically in this example using them to create interesting chord sounds. As always, these videos are made possible by my preset and sample packs over at synthhacker.com. If you do want to support these videos and get your hands on some high quality sounds made by me, I'd really appreciate you checking those out. So while I've been thinking of covering this technique for a while now, with the release of ODESZA's track The Last Goodbye, I thought now would be a better time than any. The track itself features this really interesting chord rhythm that starts super fast before slowing down and slotting into the groove of the track. A variation of this technique can also be heard in the Flume and EPROM track Spring, which a lot of you have asked me to cover. If you think you've heard this type of sound somewhere else, please do let me know in the comments. I'm genuinely curious to hear some more examples. Now, just before we jump into the technique itself, it's super important to briefly cover the chord MIDI. I'd recommend you don't overlook this. The chords are based on the ODESZA track I mentioned earlier, written in the scale of B Dorian. The big mistake I think a lot of beginner producers make is just to stop here and go straight to sound design. One thing I've realized more and more over the years is that when it comes to designing polyphonic sounds, half the battle is done before even touching the synth. What I'm referring to here is chord voicing, which essentially just means how you distribute the notes of your chord across the keyboard. For example, if we duplicate our chords, we could spread the top and bottom notes across the octaves and duplicate the root note to fill the gap. Let's do the same for the other three chords and compare to the original voicings. As you can hear, this puts us in a much better spot right away for a fuller sound. So with our chords now good to go, what's the easiest way to achieve this exponential rhythm? Well, if we open a synth like Serum that lets you use an LFO to modulate the amplitude, we can very quickly set up a basic amplitude shape and use another LFO to modulate the rate. This can be useful in some circumstances, but in order to be more creative with this and have more control, we need to move outside of the synth. The best way to achieve this technique that I've discovered, at least, involves using Ableton's arpeggiator. If we click the drop-down menu, we can change the mode to chord trigger, which instead of playing one note at a time, will play the chord as a whole at a rate we can choose. This can be a useful and fun technique in of itself, but the real secret sauce comes from this next step. Firstly, let's change the rate mode from sync to free. This allows us to set the rate by frequency instead of using measurements. Now all we need to do is figure out how to automate this change of rate in a way that lets us dial in the rhythm we're after. One approach would be to simply automate this in the arrangement, and that'd be perfectly fine, but I found this is a perfect opportunity to make use of Ableton's MIDI envelope device. This behaves the same way you'd expect an envelope in a synth, but allows us to modulate any parameter in Ableton Live, and in this case, the rate of the arpeggiator. Let's try this out while dialing in the shape of our envelope. To get even more control over the rhythm, we can then create a new MIDI track, route the output of our arpeggiator to it, and hit record. One of the coolest things about ODESZA's use of this technique is the way that over time this exponential rhythm morphs into something that fits into the groove of the track. It's a really satisfying effect. The great thing about printing our sound to MIDI is that it puts us in a position to be able to do just this. What I'd recommend is to pick a point in your MIDI you want to bring in the groove. Delete everything after that, and from here draw in whatever rhythm you'd like. This is really where you can do your own thing based on the track you're working on. The other really great thing about having our rhythm in MIDI is we can very quickly and easily split this into different layers. I kept things pretty simple here, using a filtered saw pluck for each layer with slight variations. I really want to encourage you to experiment with your own combination of sounds here based on your own taste. Bringing in sample-based instruments, for example, would open up a world of possibilities, or even layering percussion if you want the Flume and EPROM type sound. Just to give you a few ideas, one effect I really like is to complement the evolving nature of the rhythm with sounds that change over time. For example, in each layer of Serum, I used a 2-bar LFO, which is the length of each chord, to modulate parameters such as the envelope decay and release, the amplitude, noise amount, and filter cutoff. Additionally, I made each layer progressively wider as we go up in the frequency spectrum, making use of Serum's unison width control. I also grouped these layers with some processing from Decimart and RC20, as well as setting up a reverb send to give a sense of space. All these things just really help to glue our layers together. Of course, we also have our bass layer, which is again just a simple filtered saw wave. I did, however, also make use of Brainworks' sub-filter plugin to add a bit of low-end energy, especially for the first two root notes, which were a little lacking. Also, some sidechain dynamic EQ using FabFilter Pro Q3 triggered by the kick drum. So there we have it. I'm so happy to have this video out there. I think it's a really cool technique with a lot of different applications. If you do think you've heard this technique somewhere before, please do let me know. I am genuinely curious to check those out. It'd also be really useful to know if you guys would be interested in seeing more Ableton-based sound design tutorials like this one. I really enjoy making these outside the synth videos, so please do let me know in the comments. Other than that, guys, as always, thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.